Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be continuing on horror movies for the month of October. Today we're going to be talking about 2012's John Dies at the End. It is directed by Don Coscarelli, written by Don Coscarelli, adapted from a book by David Wong of the same name. Stars Chase Williamson, Rob Mays, Paul Giamatti, Clancy Brown, Glynn Turman, Doug Jones, Daniel Roebuck, Fabian Therese, and others. The plot synopsis is a new street drug that sends its users across time and dimensions has one drawback. Some people return no longer human. Can two college dropouts save humanity from the silent, otherworldly invasion? Yeah, I have an interesting history with this movie. Around the time the movie came out, like probably the same year, I became a fan of the book. I read the book for the first time. I think a friend of mine was talking about it on Facebook, or maybe even recommended to me specifically. I can't remember. And I picked up the book and ended up really, really enjoying it. I really liked it a lot. It's a fun, wacky, wild horror, science fiction, interdimensional paradoxes, and all sorts of crazy shit. Like all of my favorite things kind of wrapped up into a story. And it's done with like very tongue in cheek. It's got a great tone and a great pace, the book. So I was kind of anticipating the movie, and I was even more anticipating it because of Don Coscarelli. He directed one of my kind of like favorite movies. Even we might even watch it this month. Bubba Hotep, starring what's his name, Bruce Campbell, and Ossie Davis. Great movie, great fun movie. He's also probably more well known for the Phantasm series. That's kind of his legacy is really kind of entrenched in Phantasm. I'm more of a I'm kind of lukewarm on Phantasm. I've tried to get into it a few times, and I've seen all the movies. It just something about it, I just never really worked for me. I don't know if it's just the budget constraints or whatever. Because on paper, like it seems like it would be something I'm really into, and I can just never ever get into the movies. But when the movie came out in 2012, I was pretty underwhelmed by it. I was pretty disappointed, and I think a lot of that has to do with being so close to the book at the time. And that's just something that happens, when you're a big fan of a book and you know here it's going to be adapted to a movie or a TV show. Your expectations are a little bit higher, or you get excited about the possibilities, and when it kind of falls short or has to do its own thing, has to adapt itself, you're prone to be disappointed. And I think, especially getting older, you have to kind of learn to reconcile that. You got to like just understand that the movie is its own thing, and really the best thing you can hope for is that the spirit of the story and the spirit of the characters is intact, even if they have to kind of reconfigure things or put characters together, or change some things around. Like you want the spirit and the tone and the subtext, the themes of the story to maintain. A great example of that, like kind of writ large, I think is the Lord of the Rings movies. In my opinion, I'm not a Lord of the Rings expert or anything, but I think that Peter Jackson does a pretty good job like maintaining the spirit of the series. Don Coscarelli this is a weird one because even this far removed from it, I've seen it probably 3 times in my like all the way through over the years in the 8 years since it came out. He does a weird thing where it's like super faithful for about half the movie, and then has to kind of reconfigure and change and skip a ton of the story and then kind of fast forward to the end, and so much so that it's almost incoherent. Like the last act of the movie is kind of hard to follow to one degree or another, and I think a lot of the impact of what's going on kind of gets undermined by the fact that it cuts out all of the substance. It does all of the table setting. Like the first 120 pages, 150 pages of the book is very well represented in the movie. So much so that your expectations for how the story is going to play out further on in the movie are pretty high. Because, Coscarelli nails the tone of this material. He nails the casting. The pacing is fucking great. It really felt representative of the book. Like specifically, almost too specifically. Especially once you see the movie as a whole, once you take it in its totality, you're like, man, this is too close. This is too faithful for too much of the movie. Because once you get to the parts where they had to change and adapt and everything, like it stops kind of making sense. So they couldn't like, it's like he didn't pick out the themes and the concepts of the books and kind of pare them down enough in the early goings of the book to be able to to find a vision to get to an endpoint that felt coherent and clear. And I think to some degree, coming back years later, like I said, it's been 8-9 years since I read the book, that it still has that problem kind of. Even though I'm kind of can let go of a lot of other stuff and kind of embrace the fact that it is its own thing and it wants to be its own thing. And some stuff does work. I don't even want to say that the whole thing is kind of a wash and it just doesn't work. But it feels frustrating. Even if I think if I had not read the book, I still would have been frustrated. That's not to say it's not a good time. I think it's a really fun movie. Problems and all, it's a really fun movie and totally worth watching. If you want to check it out for yourself, there's a free movie streaming service. They do movies and TV shows called Tubi, Tubi. Not a commercial. It's not a paid advertisement, but that's where I ended up finding it because I was like, oh, I'd like to check this out and look to see if I could stream it somewhere and blah, 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 because it's fucking streaming. Movies come and go because I know it's been on Netflix before. I think it's been on Shudder before. It's been on Amazon Prime before. But, of course, when it comes to the time that I would like to watch it, it's nowhere to be found. So you got to watch it on Tubi. So you got to watch a little bit of commercials. But it wasn't too egregious. Not too bad. Yeah, I think I still would have been disappointed even if I hadn't read the book. It's got some cool stuff, though. If you're just like a fan of genre stuff, there's a lot of great like practical effects in it. The way the movie opens is amazing. It is almost exactly the way it is in the book, and Coscarelli fucking nails it. And it sets the tone and kind of the atmosphere, and sets up the characters in such a succinct, like beautiful way that you know what kind of movie and what kind of story you're about to be told right from the get-go. And the novel is the same way. It kind of sets the stakes like really high. An interesting thing about the novel is that it was released, I think, chapter by chapter on, I think it might have been cracked.com. Remember cracked.com? I don't know, is it still a thing? I think David Wong was a writer there. And so he was, he wrote it in this kind of serialized way, and in kind of in a way that you might have back in like the 40s, like the 30s to like the 70s with like the pulp science fiction stuff, Every chapter feels a little bit like an episode of something. So it starts with like a big moment, and it has all those peaks and valleys before another big moment and then a cliffhanger at the end of it. It's very well constructed that way. And it makes it a real page turner. It's one of those books when you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, well, just one more chapter. One more, I got to see what happens next. One more chapter. Another experience I had with something like that is that TV show Lost. And no matter what you think about where Lost went, if you were watching Lost around the time it was on, I came to it really late, so I was just buying the DVDs. I'd be up like all night doing like one more episode. One more. We're going to do one more. It's 4:30 in the morning. One more. It's fine. I got to be up at 8. One more. It's going to be great. Totally worth it. Got to know what happens. What's in the hatch? The movie kind of maintains that a little bit. It does still feel kind of episodic, surprisingly enough. It does feel like these scenes could be like little episodes of a TV show. And I know it's probably hack or cliche to say, but I do think that this would probably work better as like a miniseries. It's like a 6-hour miniseries. I think you could really do something special with John Dies at the end. But yeah, I even with all my reservations and kind of not understanding that it's not perfect and it definitely does not stick the landing, I do think it's a really interesting piece of filmmaking. And like I said, if you're just into the genre stuff, like there's enough to bring you in there. And while the budget is obviously kind of a lower budget movie, it is a lower budget movie rather. It's impressive some of the stuff they're able to pull off. It's also not impressive some of the stuff it really struggles in the final like 10 minutes of the movie to really pull it together visually. Coscarelli is a good director. He's a solid director. So you're not going to get something that's a complete waste of your time. And I think if you're a fan of Bubba Hotep, if you're a fan of that kind of like horror, comedy, fantasy stuff, it's definitely worth checking out if you've never seen it. Just go in knowing that it may not be all there. It's not all there. Set your expectations appropriately. Although, who knows? You know, it is one of these weird little cult things that it could be your favorite movie. I do feel like there is a weird little cult audience for this. I don't know how the book fans really feel about it, actually. I mean, I know I've been speaking from my own experience, but I'm not sure, like, writ large, what book fans think of the movie. I feel like there probably would have some, at least echo some of the same things, some of the complaints I had. But you never know these days. You never know. I don't know. I would check it out. Why not? What else you got to do? You're not doing anything. I mean, if you got time to watch this, you got time to watch John Dies at the End. That's what I say. What are you doing with your life? All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitters. There's also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos, throw it on the list, and we will get to it as soon as we can. All right, everybody. You have a good one.